We're at Augusta Distillery, and this is the first camera to exclusively see the inside of their brand new Rickhouse and the production floor. Let's go check it out. Unfamiliar with Augusta Distillery? It's the namesake of their hometown, Augusta.
The return to glory.
But not that Augusta. This is Augusta, Kentucky. Right along the banks of the Ohio River, they sit just 45 miles southeast of Cincinnati, Ohio. Augusta, Kentucky is a small, blue-collar Kentucky town with a lot of history. With a population of just over 1,000 people, it would be easy to overlook. Not only is it the home of the distillery, it's home to a famous family. We'll get to that later. Housed in an old stagecoach button factory where the remnants of the company's old sign can still be seen today, the construction of the new distillery began in January of 2023. Each month brings change to Augusta Distillery, but now they're nearing their operation stage. While the distillery has yet to distill a drop of their own whiskey, they've already set the bar pretty high. In 2023, their Buckner's 13-year bourbon won the Best Bourbon in the World award from the San Francisco World Spirits Competition, and they've got confidence that it's not going to be their last time. Before we toured the distillery, we took a quick drive just outside of the Augusta city limits to check out their brand new Rickhouse. And the Rickhouse had just been finished earlier that week. It was the first time that Augusta's regional sales director, Matt Groves, saw it for his first time as well.
Like driving into Bardstown, right?
Yeah.
When you start approaching the outskirt, the greater Bardstown area, we'll call it, you start seeing those very recognizable large structures. It's the first time I've seen it completed, so it's special for me too. That's really cool. And yes, we do have trucks with barrels on site for you. So.
Now, as we pulled up, the crew was already hard at work unloading the truck of the barrels, and today was just day 2 of unloading trucks, with only 90 or so barrels already placed in the Rickhouse. That's less than 1% capacity. The Rickhouse stands 7 stories high, and once full, it'll be home to more than 30,000 barrels of Kentucky bourbon. Now, construction of the building took a few months as they broke ground early in the winter months of 2024, and while it seems randomly placed, the location and positioning was pretty intentional. So some distilleries, they have like a climate-controlled warehouse. I see windows. Yeah. Anything special here?
Yeah, you know, we like to keep it au naturel, if you will, right? So this is going to be a traditional Rickhouse that's going to allow for those eastern to western winds, or vice versa. You know better than I which direction they're going to be coming and going, but also allow for a good amount of ventilation to be coming because we're in the windier part of the Ohio River Valley, right? We're up on the top. We're going to experience stronger winds than we do down toward the river. So ventilation like this allows that to pass through and allows a more natural fluctuation of temperatures inside of the Rickhouse for optimal bourbon aging.
Speaking of optimal aging, it's time to go in and see where those barrels will be put to age. Let's go inside and check it out.
Yeah, everything in here is good.
Rare that you see the Rickhouse empty.
So seeing it empty is certainly eerie, but it won't be like that for long. Each day, 3 truckloads of barrels are delivered, which is roughly 270 barrels per day. And while you may think it's as easy as rolling a barrel in and letting it be, loading a Rickhouse takes a lot more skill and math than you would expect. While we were up on the second floor, we got to experience the crews loading those barrels into the rick and see how they actually set up to clock the barrels. It's called clocking a barrel due to the position that the bung of the barrel faces. Yes, start the jokes now. The bung is the hole that you fill the barrel with. And when loading a Rickhouse, you want it to face as straight up as possible. Now, straight up is considered 12 o'clock, and this is to ensure that the bung remains in place as the barrel ages. While the goal is to get most of those barrels up to 12 o'clock, you should be okay as long as the bung is between 10 and 2 o'clock. Now, this is where the math and the skill comes into play. They need the barrel to be in the correct starting position before they roll it into the rick. And if a mistake is made, you're more likely to lose liquid from the barrel, which is just basically money leaking away. Now, if the clock isn't right, then the barrel needs to be taken back out of the rick and reset before returning it to its final resting position, and that just takes up more time. One thing that the crew at Augusta is excited about, now that they have their own Rickhouse, is learning more about it, especially distillery operations leader Billy Bays.
I'm excited to throw a barrel up here and just see what happens. See what happens in 8 years.
And as we mentioned earlier, a lot of what happens will be dependent on the weather. Now, weather is a huge factor when it comes to aging bourbon, and a rickhouse really highlights how that is the case. The temperature and humidity can change from rick to rick, especially from floor to floor, and despite the rickhouse being empty, it was already quite noticeable as we were making our up the stairs to the 7th floor.
And the humidity.
It's quite the hike. But you could also say that's why the best bourbon in the world comes from Kentucky, right? The climate that allows for the temperature to fluctuate so much from, the stairs. But the way that the climate, the temperature fluctuates from ground level of a rickhouse to the top is what makes bourbon bourbon. Right. Like, truthfully. Like, that's why we believe in that. That's why we do single barrel releases, because we like to let the wood and the way that the climate in Kentucky ages bourbon speak for itself. This is a very thoughtful and intentional placement of this rickhouse, right? We're on the top of the Ohio River Valley, just outside of Augusta, where we're going to experience the extremes of every season in the Midwest, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna have the hot, humid summers. We're gonna have the colder, drier winters that really bode well, which is why the best bourbon in the world comes from Kentucky, right?
Yeah.
That wood, the barrels that are going to be stored in here are going to expand. They're going to allow the bourbon to seep into them past the char. They're going to have time to do that for a few months now. They're going to rest. We're going to experience evaporation, right? Evaporation of water, evaporation of alcohol that can yield higher proofs for us, which if you've seen some of the proofs that Augusta Distillery puts out, they can be impressive at times. Then in that winter, you're getting the same door frame effect, right? You're getting the contraction of the oak. You're getting the bourbon moving back past the char, taking on more color, marrying well in the barrel, and then, like a good wedding, at the start to a marriage, we celebrate because that barrel has had time to do what it does best in Kentucky, which is mature, which is to expand, which is to contract, which is to yield deep flavors, deep colors, beautiful proofs.
Yeah.
All the things that we look for, especially in a single barrel bourbon. That's why we think single barrel bourbon is a great way to experience the way that climate impacts not just the barrels, but the liquid inside.
That's my favorite part of it, is the variable of the weather. You can't control that, and that's what makes this barrel here way different than the one down there and on the other end of the rickhouse. This one gets more sun, so this side of the building is hotter during the summer. That's
right, and you can argue single barrel expressions are the best way to experience how climate plays a role in the maturation of bourbon in the barrel, right? We're not blending it in with anything else. It's just not our focus as a company. It's a celebration of nuance. It's a celebration of consistent quality of our releases. And we're really excited to see barrels aged here in Bracken County make their way into the bottle, over the course of the next few years.
And that journey of Bracken County bourbon is about to begin. Now, back at the distillery in downtown Augusta, construction crews are hard at work on their state-of-the-art facility as they are weeks, if not days, away from distilling their first drop. Construction on the entire site started back in January of 2023, and now nearly 18 months later, they're getting the finishing touches on their production floor. And I got my first look inside that production floor with Augusta's COO, Ryan Edwards.
Welcome to Augusta Distillery.
The first thing you're greeted by as you walk into the production area are two 3,000-gallon mash cookers alongside a cruise ship-esque staircase that leads you right up to their fermenter tanks.
This will be the route our production tour takes. We're hoping that these things are cooking, well, they will be cooking at the same time. We're hoping they're throwing off enough heat. Yeah, handrails aren't on. That you will actually feel heat coming off the cookers. Safely, but yeah.
holy cow.
You see how many freaking fermenter tanks they got? 16? 18. My God.
While they continue to renovate and build upon a news story, you can tell that Augusta continues to have a strong focus on the community's history and tradition. Their fermenter tanks stand in the exact same space as the old Stagecoach button manufacturing line. But in order to honor the building's history and keep the structure of the building original, they had to specifically fabricate their fermenter tanks and the piping. Because of this, the fermenting tanks are not as tall as you would see in other distilleries. Now another ode to tradition are their low wine and high wine tanks. They sport a steamboat smokestack look, complete with paddle wheels on the inside. This honors the local heritage of the area with the riverboats that were used for transportation along the Ohio River just a stone's throw away from the distillery. Now on the other side of the room is where their own whiskey will soon be distilled. We were able to see their brand new Vendome column still, which stands 32 feet tall. It was installed earlier this year in January, and just last week they installed its twin, meaning they're now all set for distillation. There's no hiding that they're sourcing their whiskey right now. They're a nearly 6-year-old company that won Best Whiskey in the World with a 13-year-old bourbon, but they won't always be sourced. Now, the week that we were there, they had just announced that they hired their first master distiller, Alex Castle. She previously had worked in the same role at Old Dominick Distillery in Memphis, and now that they have their master distiller on board, distillation's expected to start any day. So while we await that new Augusta distillate, we can still sample some of their current offerings. One thing that I love and that makes Augusta Distillery so unique is they only sell and distribute single barrel bourbons.
So when you're talking Augusta, you're always going to have the single barrel, the cask strength, the unfiltered when it comes to our bottlings. That's it. Keeping it simple.
But it's not just those three. The age of Augusta's bourbons will always be eye-popping. Their offerings have included their Buckner's 10-year-old bourbon, the award-winning Buckner's 13-year-old bourbon, and last year they added the Buckner's 15-year-old bourbon. And to up the ante, earlier this month they added a distillery-only release of their oldest bourbon yet, Buckner's 17-year. Along with all of these, the youngest bourbon they've released is their Old Route 8, which is an 8-year-old bourbon named for the Kentucky State Highway that runs right outside the city of Augusta along the Ohio River. And that 8-year age statement is very important.
Large part of our focus being on higher age statements. While you'll be able to taste barrels from Augusta in our guest experience, at the retail level for now, we're still saying 8 years is our sweet spot, right? So you can imagine in the next 8 to 10 years is when we could have that transition of sourced and contract distillate to Augusta distillate taking place.
Awesome. Now, if you wanted to try some of the younger distillery-exclusive expressions that will never hit the store shelf, the only way to do that is on their guest experience. Lucky for us, we got a chance to try them on a tour of our own. That guest experience tour is called the River Proof Barrel Experience, and it starts in their barrel room just off the current visitor center and apparel shop. As we walk into the room, we're greeted with some old rustic tools, an exposed brick and wood look that takes us back in time. From there, you'll see tasting wheel tables atop old bourbon barrels, which form a semicircle through the middle of the room. And on the floor right in the middle, you'll find 3 more barrels of Augusta's Kentucky bourbon. Now, at the start of the tour, an Augusta tasting leader walks you through the intricacies of what makes whiskey bourbon.
What makes bourbon bourbon is 51% corn in the mash bill. No different than any other distillery you've been to. We're going to beat it inside your head.
Gives more education, but not just on the bourbon, but on the history of Augusta and the distillery. And if your tour guide is Corey, you may even get a few PG-13 jokes mixed in there as well.
B-U-N-G Fuller. Piece of wood right here is called the bung. First joke of the day, what's the hole called? Bunghole, yeah! But y'all know I've helped a lot of men and women have their first time up here, and I meant exactly what I said.
This tour is more of a hands-on experience, which you don't always get from other distilleries. Not only do we get to sample and taste straight from those 3 distillery-exclusive barrels, we got to pop the bung of the barrels as well.
Act like you can grab yourself. All right, remember, not back at your forehead.
Straight up, right?
Because we do it for camera. On the count of 3, guys. 1,
2, 3.
Woo! Thank you for not breaking my teeth. You always remember your first bung.
My first bung.
And once the bung is popped, it's time for the best part, to taste it.
Ready to drink some bourbon? Yes. I haven't had any for like an hour, so I'm ready to have some bourbon in my belly.
We all got the thieves straight from the barrel using one of their copper whiskey thieves, and I tell you what, there's something special about drinking a bourbon straight out of the barrel that it came from.
That looks really big in your hand. Come on.
There we go.
On the tour, you'll taste through a wheated bourbon, a high rye bourbon, and a traditional bourbon while using that table flavor wheel to aid your nose and palate.
Chocolate.
Another unique part of Augusta's tour is if you enjoy the barrels enough, you can get the option to take a bottle of it straight from the barrel home with you. It's sort of like a Build-A-Bear for adults. You get to be part of all the steps of creating your own bottle of bourbon. You start by thieving from the barrel to fill your bottle to the top.
We do charge by the drop.
Then once completely full,
Stop.
you kiss the cork to give your bottle some love, just like you'd kiss the heart at a Build-A-Bear. All that's left from there is to seal it up with shrink wrap and then fill out your labels to complete the aesthetic. You got your own unique Augusta Distillery single barrel bourbon that'll never make it to a retail shelf. So once we were done with our barrel tasting, we got a digital visit from someone special. Remember earlier when I mentioned a famous family?
Hello, I'm Nick Clooney, and I have a story to tell you. It's about a small band of 21st century adventurers who gathered in a little 18th century town to create something unique.
The message was from Augusta native Nick Clooney, a revered former Cincinnati news anchor, but he's also the brother of actress Rosemary Clooney from White Christmas.
My one love affair didn't get anywhere from the start.
And you've guessed it, the father of actor George Clooney.
I'll make this quick. I came here for you.
George actually attended Augusta High School right in town. Nick and his wife Nina still live minutes from Augusta Distillery, and if you visit, you can buy a special single barrel bottle of Buckner's 10, which was picked in honor of his 90th birthday. After your visit from the Clooneys, you start your tour across the facility. But as I mentioned earlier, Augusta changes day by day, so you'll never know what you're actually going to see on the tour itself. Currently, the tour takes you to their bottling line, which is held in the adjacent warehouse next to the main distillery. The crew themselves currently bottle under an old wedding tent, and this part of the tour is what they call their Pardon Our Dust guest experience. They hope that once the dust settles, Augusta Distillery will be firmly on the map as a must-see tourist destination. The first step of that journey, well, they were just officially added to the Kentucky Bourbon Trail. The next step, turning on those stills for the first time to bring you their own distilled bourbon. Just as Ferris Bueller once stated, life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you can miss it. That's the case with Augusta. Even while experiencing delays in construction along their journey, things are still moving fast, and if you don't stop in, you'll miss it. So, if you haven't tried anything from Augusta Distillery, or you haven't visited yet, you may want to make the trip, because they won't be flying under the radar for long.